Okay, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order from here. It looks like the clock says 6:30 and ask for the roll to be called, please.
King Taylor, Patterson, Thorsland,
Here.
Eisenman,
Here.
Furtado, Goss,
Here.
Esri.
Here, I'll make note, I know Ms. Furtado's still out of the country in Turkey, and Tanisha King Taylor, she sent me an email about 4:30 saying unforeseen circumstances, she's not able to attend tonight. So just make note of that. Move on then to approval of agenda and addenda. Moved by Mr. Thorsland, seconded by Mr. Patterson. Discussion, corrections.
Yeah. I just
Ms.
wanted
Eisman.
to note that. Oh, the
sorry.
agenda. Oh,
I'm moving ahead. Yeah, I'm thinking ahead to the minutes. Okay, my fault, because Jody has a correction to the minutes. Any additions or corrections to the agenda or addenda? Anything want to be pulled? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That's approved. Now then, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the ELEC committee meeting, January 10th, 2018. Ms. Eisman.
I just would like to correct it. It shows that I was present at the January 10th meeting and I was absent.
Okay.
So I would move to approve them with the correction.
Okay. Is there a second to that? Seconded by Mr. Goss. Is there further discussion or corrections to be made? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That's approved. Then move on to public participation. Mr. Michael Butler, please step forward and sit at the chair. The lowest button on the microphone will turn it on, and if you speak into it fairly close, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Michael Butler. I am with TRC Environmental, here representing Soul America, who has zoning case 922-S-18 in front of you tonight. And we'd first of all just like to thank you for taking the time to review this case, and to the staff for all the time they've spent on this with us over the last few months. We believe we have a fairly ideal site for solar here. It's located just west of Homer, right on the Vermilion County line there, directly to the west of the property. There's no residences within 1,500 feet of the site. There's industrial uses on multiple sides and a railroad right away to the north. We feel that makes it pretty ideal for this kind of use. We received unanimous support from the 4 members that were present at the ZBA meeting last week, which I think is, I've heard, fairly rare for the sites that have been in front of them, and several commented that this was the most ideal site they've seen come in front of them. So I'll be here if you have any questions when you're discussing and considering this tonight. I know one of the other items up for discussion is Soul America's request for a special meeting of the county board on February 12th, parallel to the scheduled committee of the whole meeting. They're requesting this because the current lottery program application period for the Illinois Power Authority's adjustable block program is open now, January 30th through February 13th. And all the required approvals need to be received before that time. The concern being this program seems to be so oversold that this might be the only one time into the program. They expect 4 blocks to be released, but all of the names from the sites from this list may come from this application period. So we believe it's obviously in Soul America's interest to try to get it approved now, but also in the county's interest to have another site into the lottery program to help, as an economic development driver and drive the tax base. So if you have any questions, like I said, I'll be here to answer them when this agenda item comes up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chris Storr.
Thank you. My printer failed me. and or actually the internet. I come before you uh, to in behalf of the talk about the Muhammad Aquifer and the recent release of the Muhammad Aquifer Protection Task Force final report. That was released on December 22nd of last year. I It was such a low-key event. I only found out about it earlier this week. And if you are interested in obtaining a copy of that report, it's available from the website, or you can get in touch with me. And I sent a link to John Hall. There's a need for, among the things that that this body did back in November when we passed a resolution in support of the activities of Muhammad Aquifer Protection Task Force, we cited the need for source water protection and a plan. And I would say that trusting that things are fine and no action will mean no adverse effects or impacts upon the sole source of our groundwater has been shown in other places to be a fallacy. For example, contamination of groundwater from the Man-Love gas storage field near Muhammad, to cite a local example and one that one of the board members is all too familiar with. Among the recommendations of the task force was to support the helicopter-borne transient or time domain electromagnetic geophysical soundings that would, this is a program that would cost $19 million, but it would collect geophysical data that upon which a framework could be built for all the water well, geologic, and other studies, drilling records, and tests and so forth can be integrated and interpreted. It would refine our knowledge of the sole source aquifer, including likely recharge zones and perhaps where contamination is occurring. Learning where water quality can be or already is affected alerts us to where management is most needed. Specifically, gives us information on how we can protect this valuable resource. Conservation and protection of the water resources of both water quality and quantity. The task force final report did not address conservation issues specifically. This, in my opinion, and some others, was an oversight. There is no restriction on how much water can be pumped from the aquifer, how it can be used, or where it can be relocated. Some of you have heard my story before about Joliet, Illinois, a community of 200,000, which coincidentally is about the same population as our entire county, recently learned that they had only 5 years of water remaining in the aquifer, which serves their community. Not so long ago, I had a discussion with a consultant that finds that one of the alternatives, maybe the likely one, is to clean up and treat the sewage water to the extent possible and recharge the water back into the aquifer for reuse. This is called aquifer storage and recovery. And if you care to find out more about this, it's something that is being adopted in other parts of the United States. But I ask you, does this sound like a future we want for our children? If not, it falls to us to take steps necessary to ensure that our community has abundant, safe, and healthy water. We should encourage our legislators to implement the recommendations of the task force in full and soon. And I respectfully ask the committee to consider asking that some of the staff assigned to Champaign County might be tasked to follow these recommendations and report regularly to the to this committee and to the committee of the whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. And as I said last time you spoke before us, being a board member, you're free to stick around for the meeting and participate in discussion if you have a want to.
Thank you. I think I'm going to duck and run.
Sure, not a problem. Okay, seeing no other persons in the audience, we'll close public participation and move on then to communications. Are there any from the committee members? Or I just have one. Former board member and ELEC committee member Patsy Petrie sent me an email over the weekend. She'd been watching some of the videos of the committee meetings, especially ELEC, on YouTube, and she just wants to make sure that people speak directly into the microphone. She says it's hard to hear on YouTube. I'll admit I didn't go and look at. She was specifically trying to listen to, I think, the discussion about, I guess, the Baywa, I think, solar farm, and she said that was kind of hard to hear. So just we all need to just try and make sure to speak clearly into the microphones, and it is a good thing to do. With no other communications from that to be seen, we'll then move on to 7. New business for information only. We have A, notice of noncompliance with Illinois noxious weed law. Mr. Hall, do you want to say anything to this above and beyond what your memo said? Or?
Yeah, the state for the past couple of years has been sending out these notices. A couple of years ago, I called around to other county zoning offices. I found one county that had not received a notice. I think that was Williamson County. They have tasked their county highway department with meeting the requirements of the noxious weed law. So they didn't get a notice. The noxious weed law requires the county to every year survey all the noxious weeds in the county, make a plan for their removal, and do that every year. And in Champaign County, with 1,000 square miles, I don't think that's really realistic, but if the county board wanted to take that on as a task, you could certainly do that. The way we handle it right now is if I get a complaint, I contact the landowner, and so far every time I've contacted a landowner, something's been done. It does tend to be late in the season because by the time the neighbor gets irritated enough to call, things are generally already in blossom. The landowner gets a couple of weeks to do something, and by that time, generally all they will do is cut the stuff down. It really needs to be burned at that time, and so even though we do contact landowners, I know we could be doing a better job, but that's the state of the situation. I don't think that there is any significant risk from these notices. On the other hand, who knows when the state will finally decide we should take somebody to court over this. I don't think it's very likely, but a few years ago, it was unlikely that we would even ever get a notice of noncompliance. So that's all I can say.
Discussion on this. Seeing none, we will then move on to B, Residential Electronics Collection Annual Report for 2018. Ms. Monty, do you want to
Hi,
take it?
I have like 2 visuals, so I moved over here. This is a report, a summary, an overview of what happened in 2018 with regard to the county's residential electronics collections, which the county partners with 20 municipalities partnered during 2018 to do that. So it's great that we have the support of those 20 municipalities because the costs annually for these residential electronics collections last year a comfortable estimate would have been 26,000 per collection, and that's just the cost that we share. That doesn't account the staff costs to coordinate and arrange for those. Those costs that we shared include the cost to hire a collector to be on site for these one-day collections. We have 2 of them each year, and to arrange for sorting as is required, packaging, palletizing, and loading onto semis at the site, and then being responsible for all of the collected materials until they are off-site, and doing everything that the law requires of a collector transporting those types of materials. So that was the brunt of the costs that we shared in 2018. And so to have the assistance of 20 partners in sharing those costs is great. It brings the county's portion of the cost share to approximately 4,000 or less. So that's great. And of course, we had great success in being efficient last year because we now use the online registration in advance, and that prevents backups of traffic and saves further costs by not having to have traffic patrol people managing snafus that happen when a mile or more of cars are lined up and everyone's frustrated. So that has been a really good thing, and we keep getting requests from other counties and municipalities about how we do this. It's a hot topic, and our professional organizations will start addressing that topic so that we don't have to talk to other county staff or other municipal staff to explain to them how we do it. So it's obviously a good topic to share with a professional organization and not having us do that. So what else can I tell you? I did pass out the summary of total weights collected since 2010, but this is a 2018 report, so that's what I have on the screen, just to show you that we do now have very efficient collections. The collections are generally 4 hours in duration, and we can collect 80 tons. It sounds like a lot. It is a lot, and it equates to approximately 10 or more semis being packed, if you want to visualize it that way. And we, at each collection, are very fortunate to have the support of the Champaign County Probation Services, and they're providing supervisory staff and approximately 70 to 100 community service workers for each collection. So that we couldn't do this without their assistance, and it makes it very efficient in that regard. We do line up these cars. Has everyone here been to one of these collections? Okay, so you have? Okay, so everybody has seen how it works. All right, so I did pass out an e-guide that we make available, and every time I look at it, I notice a change that's needed. I notice the costs for the private company that offers to pick up a television from a residence has now increased from what it indicated at one spot, 10 to 20 to 20 to 40 per television. So that cost is increased. And we do provide, at present, these collections to our residents at no cost. But many other counties have started charging residents a fee of $25 per TV, for example. It's possible to charge less, and maybe at some point in the future, if we continue these collections, we may want to consider charging each resident a fee for televisions that they drop off. It would be less than Best Buy, which charges $25 per television and does not accept all televisions, depending on the television size, if it's large or the wrong type. So really, these 2 residential electronics collections are the only option available to our county residents for certain size TVs, certain types of TVs, the huge console wooden TVs, the large projection TVs, which are amazing to see. That people actually used to have those 6 foot plus. It's just amazing. And it's amazing to watch them being unloaded carefully without people hurting themselves. So anyway, that's pretty much my report. I did have one other graphic to talk about. All right, and so the county's portion of contributing to these collections comes from the County Solid Waste Management Fund. And here you see from since 2012 how this fund has been going. It was flat for the first couple of years because the Illinois EPA used to offer a grant, which I used to apply for every year, which sort of offset the costs of these collections. And also, it wasn't until 2014 or so that the costs were actually starting to happen. Way back when this started in 2012, these collections, 2010 actually, contractors used to pay local governments to have these collections. So that has all been shifting and changing and over these past several years. And now this year, which is not part of this report, we have a new law which is going into effect, which is not based on weight, but is based on a convenience standard. So the whole structure is different this year. But I did want to share with you that this fund is decreasing steadily. The last figure is not an actual cost, it's just projected, and the projected cost is expected always to be the worst possible case scenario, and very likely it won't be that low. So that fund at present contains approximately $43,000, and like I said, it is very good that we can cost share with our municipalities to try to make this fund last as long as possible. So I'll stop talking, and maybe you have a question about the 2018 collection results.
Discussion. Questions. Thank you, Susan. Seeing none, we will then move on to 8, new business items to be recommended to the county board. We have A, resolution appointing recycling coordinator for Champaign County. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Mr. Thorsland. Ms. Monty, do you want to speak to this first?
Thank you. This request is being made because I was talking with the state's attorney's office and mentioned to them that I had switched offices, and the resolution that was passed in 2006 by the county board mentioned the Regional Planning Commission, and I thought, well, at the very least, we should change the origin of where this recycling coordinator staff duties are coming from, and so that's essentially what this resolution would do.
Discussion on this. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. If someone, I'll just say this before I get to B. Since we haven't had it distributed, I'm fine if we want to have discussion first and then someone make a resolution, or if someone cares to make a resolution. After I'll go ahead and read all of it, but we could have, as far as I'm concerned, we could have individual resolutions, motions for the 3 different agreements and letter of understanding, or we can do it all together. So it's kind of, I have no problem doing it how, if anybody has a real preference, but I'll go ahead and read B and all 3 parts of B. So we have B, resolutions authorizing residential electronics collection in 2019. We have 1, the agreement between collector, coordinator, and host site agreement for residential electronics collection events in 2019. 2, intergovernmental agreement between the County of Champaign, the City of Champaign, the City of Urbana, and the Village of Savoy to share costs of residential electronics collection events in 2019. And then we have 3, letter of understanding between the County of Champaign and MRM. Do we want to hear discussion first, or does someone care to make a motion? Or Susan, why don't you go ahead and speak to, speak to all of them, I guess. That'd be fine.
Okay, I did mention that this year in 2019, we are operating under a different law. It's called the Consumer Electronics Recycling Act, and it's a very progressive law in the nation. There are 22 or so other states that have these kind of manufacturer e-waste programs, but they're based on weight and not on a convenience standard. So this law in Illinois, everyone's looking at how it will function to see if it succeeds, and everybody's hoping that it will succeed. There's a lot of confusion and amongst the counties that have opted in. There's approximately 52 counties in Illinois that have opted in out of the 102. And so we needed a whole new, not a whole new, but we needed to significantly adjust the previous year's agreements that we had used for a couple of years to incorporate this new law. So that's what these changes you may notice are. So, for example, with the first agreement, before it was with a contractor, coordinator, and host site, and now it's with a collector, coordinator, and host site, just to be consistent with the new law, which requires that we specify a collector, and our contractor, who we used to use, is now our collector. So that worked out nicely. And really nothing new in that agreement that is important to note. Talk about maybe all three of the agreements reflect that we are now working under a different structure. And essentially, we have a consulting firm called MRM, which is overseeing what happens here in Champaign County under this new law. And that consulting firm is working with the manufacturer's e-waste program plan that was submitted by a clearinghouse of manufacturers in Illinois. And so we have been assigned a recycler, and we have been assigned the consulting firm, MRM. And so these agreements all reflect that. And so we are still working with Parkland College as our host site. We have a collector that we have experience with and feel comfortable with. And we have the coordinator, which is technically Champaign County in conjunction with the participating municipalities of the city of Champaign, Village of Savoy, and city of Urbana. So the other 16 or so municipalities, I just request contributions from them directly so that they don't have to be a party to these agreements. That's the way it's structured now. So we expect, the other significant thing to mention is under the new law, the local governments are responsible only for collections, not for transportation costs, not for recycling costs. That's a big shift. The manufacturer's clearinghouse, manufacturers that sell electronics in Illinois, are now responsible to cover packaging costs, transportation costs, and recycling and processing costs. And so that just is very nice to have some relief from having to be accountable and share some of those costs. So our costs have gone down this year by about 31%. And so whereas last year our total costs for a worst possible case scenario of what could happen during one of these events was $26,000, for example, now it's closer to $19,000, which is nice to have that reduction. So we're happy about that. I will stop talking because there's a lot of detail in these agreements. They have been reviewed by our state's attorney's office very carefully, and they also will be reviewed by the participating municipalities of Champaign, Urbana, and probably Savoy as well.
Thank you. Discussion. Mr. Goss.
So we're the first, since we originate this, we're the first one to really review it. Is there likely that it'll have to come back to us if there's any significant change?
If there is a significant change, that's possible, but I don't think there will be. Our state's attorney's office very carefully looked at this. I very carefully looked at it, trying to anticipate any possible change that could be of concern to the municipalities. So I did add some defined terms, which you have received another copy of tonight, in the cost share agreement, thinking, well, a municipal attorney will look at this and say, what is a CED? And that hadn't been provided in there before, so I added that. So I am hopeful that they will not have any requested revisions to that cost share agreement, which is the only one they have to sign. They did review a similar version of this last year, for example.
That was my only question.
Thank you. Further discussion? Questions? And if not, would someone care to make a motion? Mr. Goss.
I would make an omnibus motion to approve all three of these agreements in a single motion.
I would second that.
Moved by Goss, seconded by Thorsland. okay, ask for discussion again now that we do have a motion, but not necessarily expecting any. Maybe not. Oh, never mind. But seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you. That's approved unanimously. We'll then go to C, resolutions approving written notice to participate in manufacturer e-waste. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Thorsland, seconded by Ms. Eisenman. Susan, do you want to speak to this? I know it ties all right together.
The new law requires that the county opt in by March 1st, and so that's why you have this draft form in front of you. At this, I did learn earlier this week that the opt-in form can be modified in the future, which is great in case good things happen and we find a means and an alternative to have a program collection site, for example, mid-year. So it's just important to get your opt-in form in, and that's what this is. And at the present time, we would opt in to have 2 collections again at Parkland College. I know that's not very exciting, but that's what we have available at this time.
Thank you. And I'd realize I didn't read all of it, so I'll read it again to put it into the record on video. Resolutions approving written notice to participate in the manufacturer e-waste program in 2020 under the Illinois Consumer Electronics Recycling Act. And then we have one underneath that, Champaign County opt-in form to Illinois EPA. I assume, Mr. Thorsland, you're still okay with your motion, and Ms. Eisenman, you're sorry about that. I was looking at the sheet wrong and thought we had yet another letter underneath that. Discussion on that, on this item. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We'll then go to the addendum. We have the new business still items to be recommended to the county board. We have D, zoning case 922-S-18. A request by Soul America Energy, LLC, 1819 Peachtree Road, Suite 100, Atlanta, Georgia, 30309, via agent Ryan Peters, environmental engineer with Soul America Energy, with executive chairman and co-founder R. Stanley Allen, president and co-founder George Morey, and participating landowner Phyllis Jane Sinclair, 290 Chase Street, Sonoma, California, 95476-7155, to authorize one community photovoltaic solar farm with a nameplate capacity of 2 megawatts and occupying approximately 14.6 acres, including access road and wiring, in the Ag 2 Agriculture Zoning District. The subject property is a 75.33 acre tract in the southeast quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 9, Township 18 North, Range 14 West of the 2nd Principal Meridian in South Homer Township, and commonly known as the property bordered by the Norfolk Southern Railroad tracks to the north, the Village of Homer to the west, County Road 1050 North to the south, and the Vermilion County line to the east. The following waivers of standard conditions are necessary. Part A waiver for a distance of 1,340 feet between a photovoltaic solar farm and a municipal boundary in lieu of the minimum required 1/2 mile, 2,640 feet per section 6.1.5 B2A of the zoning ordinance. Part B, a waiver for not providing a decommissioning and site reclamation plan that includes cost estimates prepared by an Illinois licensed professional engineer prior to consideration of the special use permit by the board per section 6.1.1A3 of the zoning ordinance. Part C, a waiver for not entering into a roadway upgrade and maintenance agreement or waiver therefrom with the relevant local highway authority prior to consideration of the special use permit by the board per section 6.1.5G of the zoning ordinance. Part D, a waiver for not including a landscape plan as part of the special use permit application per section 6.1.5 F 9A B 4 of the zoning ordinance. Part E, a waiver for not including a weed control plan as part of the special use permit application per section 6.1.5 P3 of the zoning ordinance. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Thorsland, seconded by Mr. Patterson. Discussion, and we do have Mr. Butler available to ask questions as well, and assuming we have no objection to him coming forward if there are questions. Mr. Hall, do you have anything you want to say to this?
I just wanted to point out to the committee that waiver parts B through E, those are waivers at this point, but there's a special condition. Those items will be approved by this committee prior to a zoning use permit to allow construction, like all the other community solar farms that you've seen to date. This one also relies on being pulled in the upcoming state lottery. The upcoming state lottery that has been rescheduled 2 or 3 times now. So it's not like these are waivers from these requirements. These are waivers, and then if this project gets pulled in the lottery and is successful, then all of these things will come back before the committee for approval. But that Part A waiver for the separation, that is a waiver. There's no changing that. We had one citizen that came out to the public hearing and commented on that. That was the residence that was within 1,500 feet. But I think as described, the railroad's on the north side. The Bungie elevator is on the west side. The Village of Homer sanitary treatment plant is on the south side. And then Vermilion County is on the east side. So at the close of the public hearing, after the ZBA had already taken action, they were very complimentary. They thought this was the best site of any site they've seen yet for a small community solar farm. We haven't received any comments from the Village of Homer. We've actually received a lot of communications from Homer letting us know that they've reviewed it. The developer was there at a village board meeting. We haven't received any other communications. No one from the village came to the public hearing. So I don't know if we're likely to receive anything before the county board vote. But again, in the eyes of the ZBA, this was the best site that they've seen yet.
John, I just have one question. Having attended the ZBA meeting, and you mentioned the one lady who came to the ZBA and spoke about the solar farm. She said she hadn't heard about it. Since she is a resident of the village, is that the village's requirement then to let the residents of the village know that something like this has been proposed as opposed to the county?
Yeah, I think the village was maybe taking a casual approach to that topic, and it may have, I don't know how they do their meetings, but they weren't taking a formal vote. They were just getting an update. Obviously, it would have been beneficial if they would have sent out notice, but that landowner did receive notice for our zoning case, and probably that's where the better information was available. I don't think it changed her opinion about the solar farm.
Okay, because she implied so she got the notice from us plenty of time, but she seemed to imply that she'd almost only heard about it like a day or two before. Is kind of at least how I don't know if she said that in that many words, but that was how I took it. But that's the only reason I'm asking.
Yeah, no, no one gets a lot of advance notice for zoning cases, generally 15 days. In her case, she would have appreciated a notice from the village when they discussed it, but I don't think it was an actual action item at that point.
Thank you. Further discussion? Questions? Ms. Eisenman.
I actually have a question for Mr. Butler. All right, thank you. On the hills of talking about all of this electronic recycling and stuff, I just feel like I would love, I know I've asked this question lots of times, but I really would like to know what is the plan for, and this is by far way less acres than most of the solar farms that have come in front of us. So in my mind, I'm thinking of the one that we just did last month and the 1,600 acres, and I'm still reeling from that in my brain. But what is the plan for all of these solar panels, and how are they going to be recycled? Because they said it's 18 semi-loads for just these TV monitors and that, and this is going to be
Yep.
substantially larger.
And it depends on the timing of when the panels come out of commission and the condition of them at the time. You know, a broken panel is more likely to go to an electronics recycler kind of in a standard method and be broken down for parts and, you know, separated out glass and
Is
metals.
that just any regular electronics recycler? If there's not special ones for?
No, there isn't yet. And the
Okay.
part of the problem with the industry is there isn't the volume of panels coming out of service yet
Yeah.
to drive that to drive a real panel recycling. There are, when larger volume of panels do come out of commission in good shape, those can be reused elsewhere and commonly are, whether it's in more residential uses, similar uses around the country, or in developing countries, those are commonly used because they're still productive panels. Maybe they don't have the same efficiency. They're running at 80% efficiency after 20 years. Those are used worldwide, and we expect that to grow. You know, 20 years from now, you'll see it'll be hopefully a robust industry around these panels coming out of service.
Okay. And so currently that's just all that's in place, is that?
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Thorsland.
So effectively, most of the panels that would go early to some sort of recycling would only be damaged unusables, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And the
That's what we'd
typical
expect. I mean, and that'd be
lifespan-
something, an extraordinary circumstance where something hit it to cause that kind of
Right.
damage.
So the actual waste load from this, a decommissioning of a site, is probably going to be small if, at this point, they go to just be reused somewhere else.
Yes. Yep.
And if your agreement at the end of this term has run out, is there a desire from all of these, I think this holds for all of them, to put new panels in the same site in the future? Do any of the companies see this? Does your company envision more efficient panels later in life? You have an approved site, you come back, you renew.
Yeah, possible. It would depend on the financials
Okay.
at that time, how the panel efficiency, the market price of the energy at that point. You know, it's a little bit hard to forecast that 15 to 30 years down the line.
Right.
But
But in general, there's not an instant huge pile of panels that have to go be disposed of.
no.
Okay, very good.
Further discussion, questions, or I guess I'll open it up. Mr. Butler, do you have anything else you'd want to just mention by chance?
No, I think Mr. Hall covered it all pretty well
Okay.
for us. You know, it was heard by the Village of Homer. I don't think there were any. I wasn't at that meeting, but I don't recall there being any substantial negative comments. I know there was one gentleman there who was there more to speak against solar in general and development in general, and wasn't actually from Homer. Was from some area a little bit farther north. But I don't think there's anything else to add. I appreciate your time.
Before we take a vote, any last questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Thank you. That passes. We'll keep this off. I didn't hear any nays, so we'll say it passed unanimously, but we'll keep it off the consent because it is, again, it granted, this isn't the Baywa that we just passed, you know, for 1,600 acres, 1,200 acres actually under it fenced in, but it's still a big enough happening that we'll keep it off the consent. Okay, we'll then move on to 9, other business. We have the monthly reports. I think there's more than one report, is there not? Just the one, and it's not listed. I forget
December.
which, from the December, that's right. Any additions or corrections or questions for Mr. Hall about the report? And seeing none, we'll accept those and replace those on file. Presiding officer's report, have nothing. Designation of items to be placed on consent agenda. We have 8A, B, and C. And with that, we're adjourned.